Okay, so I'm going to get on to our next objective here, which is to bring our guest panelists in and really talk about some of the questions that we had percolating early on. Hi, Nicole.
Hi.
We have you here, so we're going to, start pelting you with these questions. So what's really exciting is you already sort of discussed the lessons learned, but I want to go into sort of this discussion of your tech stack, right? So, it's gotten complex, right? You've got 2 LMSs in play. You still have some access issues out there, but you sound like you're moving towards a very big maturity model, like, how you're maturing your whole system. I want you to talk about that a little bit. Like, what is your predilection in terms of, locking things more down or building full pathways? Kind of where are you going with the maturity of your model?
I think, we've had a lot of conversations lately. You're right. We're kind of toddling between 2 different LMSs right now, which is difficult. When we first started going remote, it was kind of I wouldn't say a free-for-all, but we gave teachers the option of, you want to use Google Meet, you want to use Zoom, whichever one you'd like to use, go ahead and use, which caused some confusion. We were trying to be flexible and open-minded about it, and yet what it caused was just some concern and feeling of being overwhelmed, not just on the part of the teacher, but on the part of the parents. And so what we learned very quickly was that we were overwhelming our community with all these different platforms and ways to get on meetings and ways to access things. And when we started implementing Schoology, which was about 6 years ago now, part of that was that it was a one-stop shop. But it never really was completely a one-stop shop because you still had other things out there. So I think I liked how you use that term, like as our systems mature and how our packaging of those systems mature, to try to ease the burden of use and access, we have to think about more than ever what's come to light is we have to think about the community, not just our students, but our parents once they're at home as the end user. And how do we make sure that things are easily accessible? Because even when you have internet access and we've given them hotspots and we still have, for example, a large, like I said, an ever-growing English learner population, and who are, they are struggling to begin with accessing language. So when you now tell them you have to go to 4 different systems, that just, and we're remote learning, you lose them, they disappear. And, and then we have to work very, very hard to get them back. So part of that kind of packaging is we started, like you said, kind of putting the brakes on and also then making some decisions like, okay, we've let you have access to both Zoom and Google Meet for 6 months. We're now going to shift to a more consistent approach, and we're going to ask all teachers to use Google Meet. But that took, again, some training. It took a little bit of, mindset shifts. There were some teachers who preferred Zoom and how does that work? And so we really had to make sure we were there to support them. But then we purchased the package so that they weren't running into barriers when they tried to do something with their students, like a breakout room or something like that in Google Meet, that they felt like they could do better in Zoom, let's say, or vice versa, to make sure there's ease of access there. We also are trying to condense and consolidate some of our other systems. So for example, we now utilize ClassLink. So everything goes through ClassLink, and that's just an easy interface. It's a very simplified way of being able to click and access all of your resources and platforms, even if you have multiple platforms. But we're also looking to how do we consolidate and make something so easy. It doesn't really necessarily have to do with students, but our teacher evaluation system platform communicate and talk with our professional learning platform. Is there a way to integrate that approach so that we're not having our teachers go to one system for one and another system for another? And So, I think stage one of kind of this digital transformation, which is where we were about 6 or 7 years ago, was accumulating all of these things, right? And learning how to use them. And now that we have kind of refined our understanding of what the most effective ways to go about using them are, now we're into the more mature phases in Virginia Beach of how do we consolidate and make a uniformed approach, because it's just overwhelming otherwise. So it's been really interesting here.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's I think you're a little ahead the national curve, because there's still people are like, what are you talking about? Why would I, what, but you're actually, I think what you're really doing is you're thinking about the digital learning experience.
Mm-hmm.
You're sitting in the seat of the student and the teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And you're saying, what? How do I navigate all that? Can I make it so that it's seamless and it's engaging and I'm not lost in a 404 error and I just decide I don't want to do it anymore because, that video didn't work or something, right?
And because that's not really an option anymore, right? It's not an option to just say, I don't want to do it. It used to be. I mean, it really did, but not anymore. The other thing is that we, as we move forward, one of the things we realized is we have to build the capacity of all of our staff, including ourselves, to be nimble, to be versatile, to be flexible, because technology changes so quickly. We don't want to be caught in a situation where, now we don't want to be flip-flopping every year, but we also don't want to be in a situation where we continue to use something because it's comfortable versus because it's what we need, or because, there might be something more efficient out there. There might be something. So, Schoology was a huge learning curve for us. As we shift and make this change over to Canvas, it's not such a learning curve anymore, and it shouldn't be. And our teachers are, have learned that flexibility and that to be in that space where they're kind of, for lack of a better term, comfortable being uncomfortable, right?
Yeah.
Because they know the learning curve is not going to be as steep.
Yeah, which is why when we talked about those responsibilities earlier, because they have a responsibility to stick through it. But the interesting thing is that you could also have your internet cut off at any moment, and so your flexibility probably has to include all the way back to like, okay, nobody has access and the power went out. Well, now what do we do? So there has to, it's like serious flexibility. So being able to resort back to some other methodology is also critically cool. All right, so let's move on to this next thing, which is you talked a little bit earlier in the day with Sharon with us about the collaboration you've seen take off. And we know as Learning Counsel that we come from the days, only just pre-pandemic for most places, where if you're a teacher, you're like the king or queen of your little closed off room. And you didn't really ever have to really truly collaborate. Sometimes it was sort of your social side says, I'm just going to work with my other 6th grade teachers just a little bit, just to share how valuable my lessons are. You know what I'm saying? But now it's like we turned a revolutionary corner, and the sharing and the wanting to have a culture of I'm part of something greater than me and my room. This is a huge thing. So can we talk about that and what you've seen?
Yeah. So again, I think, just the shift happened because it had to, but I think the digital piece has really opened up that collaboration, and not just the ability to collaborate, but the willingness to collaborate. Collaboration is different online. It's different digitally than it is in person. And sometimes what we have found, just like we have found with students, is that some teachers who might not have been so willing in person to share, to open up, to share ideas, are much more willing when you put it on a digital platform and say, hey, let's discuss via this discussion board. Let's have a common sandbox where you're putting ideas in there or activities that you've developed so that we are all working together and working smarter and not harder, right? So we've seen an openness toward that from some teachers who might have been closed off before. I think, Google has been our great friend. Just being able to open up a shared, anything that's shared and access something and make changes to it and collaborate right there in a document has been, it's been around forever, but it's not been a necessity. So people didn't tend to use it. And then it became a necessity. And now that it's not quite a necessity anymore, people are still using it. They don't want to go back, they don't. And the other thing is our reach, I should say, our reach for professional learning and our reach within the community has become much greater because of technology. We had, for example, a much greater community involvement with our English language learner parents, who are oftentimes very difficult to reach, very difficult to engage. But you say you're going to meet online, or you put a webinar out there, we had a much higher participation rate. Professional learning, starting to make that asynchronous through some of the resources and platforms that we have, or even synchronous. People are it's just the convenience of it too. So with that, I think the convenience starts it, but then that opens everybody up to, as an outlet to be able to share. It's been really remarkable. And that's something we know our superintendent had us as leadership team do I'm sure lots of school divisions have done this, kind of like a keep drop ad, right? And talk through in our various departments. So, what are the lessons we've learned? What do we know as a result that we don't want to keep doing? What do we know we want to keep doing that maybe we didn't think about before this time? And what do we know that is a necessity to add that we hadn't before? And we overwhelmingly stated across departments that this collaboration and communication across the teachers, across schools, across departments, into the community has been so wide reaching and has been nothing but positive for us as a whole.
Yeah.
That's been one positive outcome.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was going to ask you about positives later, but you've already pointed out this huge one, which is, it's like you coalesced into a team.
Mm-hmm.
You can imagine like what it might be to be a Navy seaman and you're on the high seas and all of a sudden everybody's got to do their job because a big wave comes in and you coalesced, right? Like a thing came in and you all stepped up, including the parents and the students, which is amazing.
Surprisingly, because you think as digital as something that, because when you think of kids, I've got a 12-year-old, right? And he isolates himself up in his room, and I see it as isolating because he's on his, his games and he's on his computer, but he's really being really collaborative and communicative with his friends far more than he would if he didn't have the technology. And it's the same thing with us. We thought that it was going to isolate everybody, but the feedback we got was really that we felt a greater sense of community, and teachers felt a greater sense of collaboration. And many teachers said that even during when we were fully remote, that they got to know their students in a way that they never have before. They had to make types of efforts to get to know them. Yeah. And that they felt closer to students than they ever did in their, face-to-face classroom experiences. So that was interesting too.
Yeah, this is a really interesting moment, right? So, yeah, because some of the kids excelled. Mm-hmm. They did way better. And then other kids were like, they curled up in a ball. They're the social animals.
Yeah. There's certainly, I'm not saying there's certainly issues, and we have certainly seen, that there's definitely mental health issues and things like that have been a result of this. But I think that just the teachers stepping up and making this concerted effort to try out different strategies and different ways to get to know their kids in a digital environment was really powerful.
Yeah, isn't that a blessing? Yeah, I like to count our blessings right now. Like, it's so powerful. So we talked about the future a little bit so far, but we talked about the good things. Let's talk about the future a little bit more. We've talked about maturity model, where things are going. When you answer me on future, we've talked a lot today and also yesterday about hybrid logistics and the management of time and space and the mutation of the model. So as you give me your thoughts about the future, could you touch on that as well?
I think that's a challenge, and continues to have to be at the forefront of our minds as we work with teachers, is this challenge of making sure that there is a appropriate hybrid model in place for instruction, and an appropriate division of time and usage of resources, right? So, to be perfectly transparent, there are classrooms that I've walked into where kids have been sitting on, just as recently as last week, just sitting on a computer, and they've been on their devices and they're working personally, but there's no teacher interaction whatsoever. So we can't go off the deep end on one end or the other. So really thinking about how to make that hybrid model work while you're in a classroom environment. It's like you had said earlier, we don't want to go back fully. We don't want any teacher to have this this mindset that, okay, everything's going back to normal and I'm going back to exactly the way it was before, because I don't know that that's even possible. So how do we provide high quality instruction in an environment that leverages the technology in a way that is easily integrated into what we know is already good best practice with the teacher in the classroom? Because we do know that the technology will never replace the teacher. But you have to have that high quality instructional piece too. So how are you leveraging small group instruction, and how are you utilizing perhaps even technology within your small group instruction? You heard Scholastic talk about all the different programming and models that they have related to differentiating support for students depending on their level of lexile or reading. Well, that's part of small group instruction. So it'll look different, but if you just throw the software at them and say, okay, now we're going to replace small group instruction, what we used to do with this, that's not going to be effective either. So our models have to shift, and our ideas around how do we support teachers to operate in that new setting and in that new environment moving forward. So that's where we kind of see that happening. I don't ever see us going back to a time or a place where teachers are providing, it's like what you said about, the PDF. I don't want to work in a PDF, right? So,
Yeah.
and really zoning in on those teachers who are, and providing them the support, not being, not being judgmental in any way, but here, let us support you to show you how to effectively integrate these really high tech, software programs that we have that are personalized and are able to personalize and differentiate into what you're trying to do to make your life easier. Because teachers are struggling right now. So that's kind of where we see the future heading. We're doing a lot of professional learning around that hybrid piece, and also collecting feedback from teachers every day, especially as we are looking at learning loss and where kids are, and how can we use those our digital tools to help accelerate versus focusing on remediate, right? How can we help them accelerate?
Yeah, both ends, right? Like remediate for some, accelerate for others. This isn't really, if we thought about this 2 years ago, this is revolutionary thinking, right? Like, wow. Right?
It takes something like this to get the wheels turning, really, right?
Yeah, so wow. But I want to sort of end off, because I've kept you a long time today already. I'm just so we don't have to stay on for another whole half hour, keep you too much longer. I want to end off with you talking about this, which is, you just touched on many points which indicate that you're in your mind, you're starting to redefine what teaching is. Mm-hmm. Teaching, at least when we've talked about it as Learning Counsel, news media, and research, is mutating to a precision of direct instruction. It's a precise thing. Mm-hmm. It's not a always on, running everything, doing every little thing. It is, I am helping you unravel why you don't get fractions. Yep. Right? It's becoming a very precise thing and not a every duty thing. So what are your thoughts about that? Because I really feel like as a leader, you're going to be leading that discussion in the next year or so.
This in the past, 10 to 15, maybe 15 years, you've heard the expression, don't be the the sage on the stage with the guide on the side, and a teacher is facilitator. And I've always pushed back on that, because what I've always said is, you don't want a teacher is supposed to be a teacher, not a facilitator. But what are you teaching them? You're teaching them how to access information. You're teaching them how to, it's not, you're teaching them how to be self-sufficient in a way, so that they don't constantly have to come to you. Direct instruction, we know from Hattie's research and a host of other people's research, has a significant effect size. That it is probably the most important thing a teacher can do. Yeah. But you're right, diagnosing to a pinpoint where a student's needs are, whether that be the student needs acceleration or the student needs has a deficit and needs specific extra attention or whatever, direct instruction in this specific area, helps the teacher personalize that experience for students and help build that student agency. But you had said this before, and it's so true. A teacher would go crazy trying to do that on his own or her own. You can't diagnose every single thing and then create 25 to 30 or 150 if you're a secondary teacher, personalized, learning experiences. That's impossible. But you can leverage technology to help you do that. And so I think that's where, we've got a lot of tools in place, but selecting those tools and really listening to teachers on about their effectiveness and how it's working, and supporting teachers in the use of it so that they're using it correctly, and using it, period, is going to, is for us, that's so important. And yeah, there is definitely a shift. I mean, we don't want teachers to be the sage on the stage, and we don't want teachers to stand off to the side and just be a guide either. We want them to have deliberate, purposeful, direct instruction that targets each student's needs. And you got to leverage technology to do that.
Yeah, and you just defined it perfectly right there. Mm-hmm. That is where we're going, and what leaders need to lead on is, what are you? Like, mm-hmm. As a teacher, what are you now? Right. Because we're getting to the point where we've defined every human because of systemic inequities, right? Mm-hmm. Every little human that we try to cause to learn anything is an individual. Mm-hmm. And every human teacher is an individual. And the only thing technology really should be doing is elevating our ability to be human, right? Mm-hmm. In every direction. Total personalization for the student, teachers' precise human qualities being used at their extreme, right? Mm-hmm. Like, what a human mind can do is so much better than you could get a machine to do. I mean, machine can spot some branch logic and some algorithmic inference and go, well, maybe try this. And here's a recommendations engine for 67 things you might distribute to the student. That's great. That's great. But you're eyeballing mm-hmm. that kid. Mm-hmm. And you found out that their parents just divorced. Mm-hmm. So that's a different problem. You're not going to see that in the academics, right? That's a different thing. So elevating the humanity, I think, is where we're going as leaders. And I'm glad you said everything that you said. So your final comments, like, what else do you want us to know?
Oh, gosh. This is going to sound so cheesy, but I just want everybody to know, hang in there. We got this. We have so many. I felt like at the beginning of this year, there was some sense of return to normalcy, like it was before. But we were able to stop focusing on triaging and being reactionary. And we were able to start going back to being visionary and think about how we can innovate practices for the future, which we had such big plans for. And then everything came to a halt. So I'm sure everybody's kind of feeling the same way. And I would just say what we're trying to do, and what I would encourage everybody else to do, is in the face of continuing to have to triage, probably unexpectedly, it kind of caught us by surprise that we weren't able to really fall back into non-COVID times, still being really aware of teachers' needs and administrators, for us as central office, as building needs and of their concerns and of their struggles, and being responsive to that. But at the same time, having this separate piece where we're continuing to move forward without overwhelming the teachers, because we need to know where we're going, and we can't stop the innovation. We can't stop the progression of work, because eventually at some point we're going to be out of times like these. So, I know everybody's probably in the same boat, and I would just encourage everybody just to continue to lean on each other. We've got great support systems out there across Virginia, I know, and the DC area and the state. So we'll continue to reach out, and anybody is welcome to reach out to us as well.
Good. Well, great final comment, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
Both you, I want to thank profusely, and I'm very proud too. I just want to be like the person who tells you I'm very proud of you.
Well, thank you very much. It was so great to see you again.
Yeah, so good to see you again. And tell Sharon thanks so much too. Her contribution was really great. And carry on until we can see each other again. Carry on. Okay, well, I'm going to do a final share and thank you, but to everyone that was with us today. So again, let's all give a hand to silently Nicole and Sharon. And I'm going forward here, not backwards. Thank our sponsors, ClassLink, Scholastic, Cisco, Learning.com, and Renaissance. Thank you guys so much. Sharing that screen right now. And finally, it's been great being with you all. We will be back either physically on site in the DC, Virginia, West Virginia area next year, or we will do this digitally again, depending on, the COVID scares happening out there. So stay tuned. And thank you everyone for being with us. Goodbye for now.